Imagine the government legally locks away your original birth certificate. Like, they tell you it is strictly for your own protection.
Right, for your safety.
Exactly. And as a result, you are not allowed to see it. But what if they then turned around, took a digital copy of that exact same hidden biological truth, and just handed it over to a private defense contractor building artificial intelligence models?
Yeah.
I mean, the central thesis here is that the sealed record and the exfiltrated record are the exact same record.
It's a heavy statement to open with, I know, but it completely reframes how we have to think about, data privacy, state power, and human identity.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking this massive, incredibly detailed forensic investigation recently published by Thoughtless Delineation. It's titled, "They Sealed Your Origins to Protect You, Then They Sold Them."
And it's quite a read.
It really is. Our mission today is to walk you through this highly complex, frankly startling web of information. We're looking at the DOGE SSA data crisis, a $29.4 billion procurement network, and how the state's identity management infrastructure actually manufactured a data scarcity that was later exploited.
Yeah, and the tone we really need to take today is what the investigation calls post-tragic.
Post-tragic.
Right. We are looking at this clearly forensically because, what we're examining isn't just a cybersecurity failure. It is a structural disclosure about who actually owns biological identity in the United States.
So let's start with the database at the very center of this breach. Before we can understand the institutional machinery that made this data so incredibly valuable, we kind of need to understand the asset itself, right?
Absolutely.
The target data is a federal database called the Numident. What exactly is sitting inside of that system?
Well, the Numident is essentially the master file of the Social Security Administration. It contains roughly 500 million Social Security number applications, going all the way back to 1936.
Wow, so pretty much everyone.
Pretty much. But the critical detail, the reason it is the absolute focal point of this investigation, is what happens at the exact moment of the original application. The Numident captures the biological father's name and the mother's maiden name.
Which means, for adoptees, this database holds a foundational truth that somehow, survives the state-level adoption process.
Yes, exactly.
It predates the court orders that actually seal those original birth records.
Precisely. Because, when an adoption is finalized, state courts seal the original birth certificate and issue an amended one. But the Numident is a federal record, so it's one of the only surviving traces of biological parentage that the state's identity erasure machinery just didn't overwrite.
Right. And that sets the stage for the exfiltration timeline detailed in the report. Because according to the investigation, in February of 2025, roughly 12 Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE operatives, embedded themselves at the Social Security Administration.
Yeah.
And they didn't appear on the official organizational charts. Their legal authority to access certain systems was highly contested by career staff from the start.
And one of those key operatives was a software engineer named John Solly. The sequence of events over the next few months is just crucial here.
Right.
In March 2025, a federal court actually issued a temporary restraining order barring DOGE from accessing specific SSA data systems due to severe privacy concerns.
But the timeline shows that career security protocols were bypassed anyway, right?
Completely bypassed.
Because according to the investigation's documents, on March 24th, which is just 4 days after that restraining order was issued, a DOGE member actively searched the Numident.
And that exact same day, another DOGE operative, acting in their capacity as an SSA employee, signed a voter data agreement with an advocacy group called True the Vote.
True the Vote, right?
Yeah. And to be clear, the Department of Justice later admitted in court filings that this agreement was likely non-compliant with both SSA policy and the temporary restraining order.
Wow. Okay, so then the situation escalates significantly in June of 2025. The Supreme Court votes 6-3 to restore DOGE's access to the agency's systems.
Right.
And just 4 days after that ruling, Solly requests that a copy of the entire Numident be moved to a private, unauthorized Cloudflare server.
And the security warnings at this point were glaring. Career security staff explicitly warned there was a 35 to 65% probability of a catastrophic breach if the data was moved to this unauthorized server.
That is a massive risk.
It is. But a DOGE-affiliated executive overrode those security experts, stating on the record that the, quote, business need was simply higher than the security risk.
So the data is moved, and the Social Security Administration effectively just loses the ability to audit it or track who is accessing it.
Exactly. And by August, the SSA's chief data officer blows the whistle and resigns in protest.
Right.
And then we see a major pivot in the timeline. By October 2025, John Solly leaves the SSA entirely. He takes a new position as the Chief Technology Officer of the Health IT Division at Leidos.
And for those who don't know, Leidos is not some small startup. They are a massive defense contractor, and crucially, they hold a $1.5 billion contract with the SSA.
Yep.
And shortly after Solly joins them, Leidos announces a major federal health AI partnership with OpenAI.
That sequence, from extracting the data under the guise of government efficiency to immediately transitioning into the private health AI sector, that is the actual mechanism of the extraction.
So here's a question you're probably asking right now, especially if you follow data privacy debates. We're talking about this deeply visceral reality, right? Having your core biological data sitting on an unaudited server. But whenever tech contractors are questioned about this, their defense is always sanitization. They argue, if they strip the names and the social security numbers from this data before uploading it into AI models, it becomes anonymous.
Right, that's the standard line.
So why doesn't that protect the people in the Numident?
Because in modern computer science, that is known as the sanitization illusion. Stripping direct identifiers, like a name or a 9-digit number, it does not create anonymity.
Really?
No, it just creates a commercially exploitable graph that technically complies with outdated privacy laws. The true commercial asset in the Numident isn't your specific name, it is the relational structure of the data.
Meaning the way every person is connected to every other person.
Yes, the biological kinship networks, the geographic distributions, the unbroken parent-child chain stretching across 90 years of American history.
Wow.
If you de-identify a map by removing the street names, the shape of the roads and the intersections still tell you exactly what city you're looking at. In data science, re-identifying an individual from a highly detailed relational structure is a solved problem.
That is terrifying.
And this specific data is extraordinarily valuable for training AI-driven health analytics and heritable disease risk modeling.
So if this relational data is so highly prized by health tech companies, why don't they just buy it through traditional legal data brokers?
Well, because they can't.
Right. And that leads us directly to the institutional machinery that surrounds this entire event. The data is uniquely valuable specifically because the state artificially hides it.
Yes.
The thoughtless delineation investigation calls this the architecture of silence. Can you explain how that legally functions?
Sure. In the United States, adoption functions as a state-run identity management system. It utilizes a legal concept known as the as-if-born-to doctrine.
Let's break that down because it sounds like legal jargon, but its real-world impact is profound.
Right. So when an adoption is finalized, the original birth certificate is sealed by a court order. The state then issues an amended birth certificate.
Okay.
This new document literally lists the adoptive parents as if they physically gave birth to the child. It legally overwrites the biological truth.
It's like deleting a file on a public computer, but the state keeps a hidden backup on a secure federal server that you are never allowed to access.
That is exactly how it works. And the investigation points out a very harsh reality regarding why this is done. Those original records are not sealed to protect the individual adoptee.
Right.
They are sealed to protect the institution of adoption, to prevent any disruption from the biological family, and to ensure the adoptive parents have undisputed legal and social ownership.
This creates an intense information asymmetry. Adoptees are denied access to their own origin records by law.
Yes.
They have to spend years fighting in closed record states just to petition a judge to see their own original birth certificates, and they are routinely denied.
Yet, while the subject of the data is locked out, DOGE operatives and commercial actors achieved what the source calls God-level access to that exact same biological information.
It's infuriating.
It is. Biological identity is treated as a managed asset. It is available to the state for governance, and it's available to the market for extraction. The only person it is explicitly withheld from is the human being it actually belongs to.
And to make matters worse, this wasn't just a situation where someone walked out the door with a hard drive once. The investigation identifies a piece of software called Eden 2.0.
Yeah, the API.
Right. This was a new Social Security number verification API built by John Solly while he was embedded at the SSA.
And for clarity, think of an API or application programming interface as a live digital pipeline. It allows two different software systems to talk to each other. Solly's API pulls data directly from the Numident in real time.
Which means we're looking at a persistent live query interface. It is feeding external agencies without any of the normal consent controls or oversight.
Exactly.
And the way the government retroactively handled this is genuinely striking. Because on January 8, 2026, the SSA filed new System of Records notices, or SORNs, in the Federal Register.
Right.
These notices legally expanded the agency's data sharing capabilities to third parties and the Office of the President.
And the timing of that SORN expansion is the tell. The investigation argues that this expansion was simply the administrative legalization of the exact unauthorized data sharing practices that DOGE operatives had already been doing unlawfully for the previous year.
Unbelievable.
They broke the rules to build the pipeline, and then the state rewrote the rules to make the pipeline legal.
It is a bleak picture. I mean, it's like being locked out of your own house for your supposed safety, only to stand on the sidewalk and watch the government hand a master key to a defense contractor so they can map your floor plan and sell the blueprints to a tech company.
That is a stark, precise way to frame the reality of the architecture of silence. But if we know the contractor was given the master key, the burden of proof shifts. How do investigators actually prove the contractor is using those blueprints in their commercial systems?
Well, this is where the forensic intelligence comes in. To prove that the Numident data is sitting inside commercial health AI systems, investigators have developed a highly specific methodology, and it's based entirely on the adoptee experience.
Yeah.
How do adoptee identity anomalies definitively prove this exfiltration happened?
The investigation outlines 3 specific forensic tests. Test 1 is called the dual entry signature.
Okay.
Because of how the Numident was historically structured, adoptees often have sequential entries. There is an original SS5 application filled out before the adoption, and then an SS10 remuneration filled out after the adoption is finalized and the name is changed.
So if you look at an adoptee's file, their date of birth and their place of birth stay perfectly stable across both entries. But their parent fields change completely from biological to adoptive.
Exactly. And the investigation notes that this specific structural fingerprint, stable birth data with entirely overwritten parent fields, it exists nowhere else in any standard commercial data set.
Wow.
If a private AI system returns both sets of parents for one individual, it absolutely has ingested Numident data. There is no other place they could have gotten it.
Okay, that makes sense. And test 2 is the kinship coherence check.
Right.
This relies on looking at population-level modeling within a commercial health system, because if you run the numbers, adoptees appear as statistical outliers.
Data scientists look for demographic spikes. For example, during what is known as the baby scoop era, which was roughly from the end of World War II up until the early 1970s, millions of unmarried mothers were systemically coerced into relinquishing their infants.
Right.
That creates a massive, anomalous demographic spike of adoptions in the United States. So if a supposedly anonymous, sanitized commercial data set reproduces the exact demographic spikes of the U.S. adoption cohort, it is a Numident-derived data set.
Then there is test 3. The pre-erasure biological name probe. And this is the test that truly reveals the human cost of this investigation.
Yeah, it really is.
It involves a consenting adoptee who lives in a state with closed records, querying a commercial system to ask for their own sealed biological parents' names.
If the commercial system returns those biological names that are legally sealed by a state court and exist only in that pre-adoption entry of the federal Numident, the exfiltration is definitively proven.
Right.
There is no alternative explanation for how that commercial system acquired those names.
I have to pause here because the ethical constraint of this test is incredibly heavy. I mean, to prove a massive federal data breach, we are essentially asking an adoptee to serve as a forensic instrument.
We are.
We are asking someone to potentially discover their severed biological parentage by querying a defense contractor's AI model completely outside of any legal framework or therapeutic support structure. Isn't that forcing the victim of the state's secrecy to bear the emotional and psychological cost of the investigation?
It absolutely is. And the investigation explicitly validates that reality. Adoptees are simultaneously the key witnesses to this breach and the primary casualties of it.
Yeah.
But this ethical nightmare is exactly what forces us to look past the technical cybersecurity failure. The data breach is just the symptom. We have to look at the massive industry that created this structural vulnerability in the first place.
Because the DOGE operatives merely monetize what the adoption industrial complex manufactured.
Yes, we are talking about a $29.4 billion sector, and the investigation centers on one crucial foundational statistic. In the United States, there is a 40-to-1 ratio of prospective parents to available infants.
40 to 1. That is an overwhelming supply-demand imbalance.
And an imbalance of that magnitude does not sustain a $29 billion industry naturally. It relies on a deeply entrenched procurement infrastructure to maintain supply.
The investigation cites several explicit examples of this infrastructure. For instance, the report notes Representative Mary Miller sponsored H.R. 9218, known as the Protecting Adoption Act. According to the source text, this bill codifies cash transfers for housing and utilities as adoption promotion, which essentially creates a prepayment framework for infants.
The investigation also points to the zero-tolerance family separation policy at the U.S. border. It reports that reclassifying separated children as unaccompanied minors systematically served as a supply pipeline for the domestic adoption market.
Then there is the lobbying apparatus, the National Council for Adoption, or NCFA.
Yeah, this part is wild.
The source documents that between 2001 and 2005, the NCFA received $20.8 million in federal grants. And while receiving taxpayer money, they simultaneously spent over $1.7 million lobbying specifically to maintain sealed records.
It functions as a taxpayer-funded suppression loop.
Exactly. When you synthesize all of this, the core argument becomes very clear. The sealed record created the information asymmetry. If the state never utilized the as-if-born-to doctrine, if they never issued amended birth certificates that erase biological truth, the Numident would just be a standard, mundane genealogical database.
The adoption system manufactured the scarcity. They made biological truth a hidden, protected asset, and by doing so, they gave the Numident its immense commercial value for health AI.
Right. Because if there is no hidden biological truth, there is no shadow commercial value for a defense contractor to extract.
Exactly.
So the cybersecurity journalists covering this as a government data hack and the investigative reporters covering the adoption industry are actually investigating the exact same extraction operation from different angles. They just haven't realized they are standing in the same room.
That is the defining synthesis of the thoughtless delineation report. And because the problem is a deliberately constructed market, this raises an existential question about how we fix it. Simply tweaking the cybersecurity rules or pushing to, quote-unquote, reform the adoption system will never solve the core issue.
That brings us to the post-tragic turn of the investigation. The argument that reform is essentially a trap and that abolition of the legal fiction is the only viable structural solution.
Reform asks how to make a fundamentally extractive system slightly less harmful. It tightens data regulations or changes funding structures while entirely preserving the $29.4 billion system and its legal fictions.
Right.
Reform doesn't ask what the system is actually designed to do.
The investigation argues for abolition, specifically replacing adoption with legal guardianship frameworks.
Right. Legal guardianship is a highly effective way to protect children who are genuinely in need of care, but it does so without legally erasing their biological identity. It provides stability without the as-if-born-to doctrine.
And by shifting to guardianship, you collapse the extractive market. If the legal fiction is abolished, amended birth certificates cease to exist. If the state no longer systematically hides biological truth, the information asymmetry completely collapses.
And if that asymmetry collapses, the Numident loses its shadow commercial value overnight. Eden 2.0 goes from being a covert back channel to a sealed records economy, back to just being an administrative tool.
I want to ask the vital question that almost always gets lobbed at this movement when abolition is brought up. Does abolishing adoption mean abandoning children who genuinely need care and housing?
The investigation addresses this sharply and clearly. No. Abolition means providing care through robust legal guardianship without legally severing a human being from their biological truth.
Right.
It means providing a safe home without converting a child's identity into a managed tradable asset for the state and the market.
It is an incredibly powerful, structurally sound argument. For you listening, if you want to dive into the OSINT, the open source intelligence, meaning the publicly available data, court filings, and primary documents that back up this entire framework, you really need to read the full investigation on the Thoughtless Delineation Substack. It is a masterclass in forensic analysis.
And I will leave you with a final systemic question to mull over. If our deepest, most sensitive biological truths can be converted into an AI training asset the very moment they are legally severed from us by the state. Wait, the very moment they are severed from us by the state, what other parts of your civic identity are currently being structurally prepared for market extraction?
A truly chilling thought to end on.
Mm.
We started today talking about how the sealed record and the exfiltrated record are the exact same record.
Yeah.
It turns out you cannot protect a truth by legally erasing it. You just make it incredibly valuable to the people who hold the eraser. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of identity. Stay curious, stay clear-eyed, and we'll catch you next time.